Hey everybody, what's going on? This is TwoHeadedFlounder. Welcome back to another live deck profile. This might be the last post-rotation one for a little bit, just due to the fact that we're kind of running out of new cards to be making decks out of. If I can think of anything, or if you guys want a certain deck, leave a comment below, and maybe I'll tackle that deck next. But Shiftry is basically the last GX card from the new set that is relatively good and worth looking into, so here we are. So, of course, we're playing Shiftry. Shiftry GX is a very odd one. So, it's got 240 HP, it's a stage 2, got a double colorless retreat cost, and a weakness to fire. So, right away, there's a lot going for it. Fire's not really dominant force right now, and the 240 HP is really, really solid. So, he's got 3 attacks. He's got Perplex for 1 grass energy, does 40 damage, and it leaves your opponent's active confused, so it's a lot like Espeon, which is really cool. I do like Confusion. I know it's 50-50 and I don't know, but it's definitely one of those things that makes your opponent go, do I attack, do I not attack, do I retreat, what do I do here? And it really messes with how they play, so I like that a lot. But Extrasensory does 90 plus 90 if we have the same amount of cards in our hand that our opponent does. So, with cards like Judge and Copycat, and the fact that we're playing Zoroark in this deck, Shiftry is going to be able to use Extrasensory pretty damn well. And 180 plus 30 with a Choice Band is 210, which means we're going to be knocking out Zoroark GX's pretty much anything that has that amount of HP. So yeah, I think Shiftry is super solid. And then we have this can't be the same name, Extrasensory GX. Same attack cost, but what you do is you shuffle one of your opponent's Pokemon in play, and all cards attached to it back into their deck. It would have been better if it was cheaper. If it was like a grass. But yeah, you know, it is what it is, and removing annoying Pokemon from play is pretty okay. So before we put those down, let's look at the rest of Shiftry's lineup. Of course, we have C-Dot. We're using the 60 HP one because it's got 60 HP, plus the fact it's got double colorless attack that does 30. Other than that, that's just about it. But we're playing 3 copies of that because we're playing a 3-1-3 lineup of Shiftry GX here. So Nuzleaf though is really cool. So pound for a grass energy is okay. It's got 90 HP, which is pretty solid. But clear out. Look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter card from there. Your opponent shuffles that card into their deck. There are a lot of times where your opponent will go like, Ultra Ball my hand down, Lele, grab a supporter for the next turn. And then you go, okay, clear out. Remove that supporter, now you have no cards in your hand. And I think that's really cool. And, because your opponent's basically saying like, well, if you got a supporter to change my hand size, you're going to do it anyways. So, yeah, Shiftry, or Nuzleaf is really cool. Kind of wish that Shiftry could reuse it, but I'm not putting a Shining Celebi into the deck just for that. So, yeah. I just thought it was pretty neat. Also, due to the fact that it's very disruptive, so like the first couple turns of the game, if you can get that off, you might be able to mess your opponent up really good. So next up we have a 4-4 line of Zoroark. I know this is a Shiftry deck, but Zoroark is the main attacker. It's double colorless, and it's just easier to get to function. You just have to evolve it once, and Riotous Beating will do a whole lot of damage. Shiftry is a great attacker, but it's expensive compared to Zoroark. So mainly our attacker is going to be Zoroark GX. Next up, we got 2 copies of Lele. I wanted 3 copies in this deck. However, I couldn't justify it due to the fact that I have a lot of other techs in this deck, which we'll get into. But Wonder Tag, fantastic ability, lets us search our deck for a supporter, use it for the turn. It's going to be great for being able to consistently use Copycat and Judge with Shiftry, so that way we can get the maximum damage output with Shiftry, as well as it being a pretty solid backup attacker. So, next up we have a copy of Tapu Koko, because Free Retreat is always great. We don't really want to be discarding energy anymore. So, whenever we Guzma, we're probably going to want to throw up Tapu Koko for the Free Retreat. But also, just being able to use Flying Flip the first turn to soften up everybody means Shiftry can then potentially hit 230 by technicality. So, I think Tapu Koko is a pretty good inclusion. Next up, we have a copy of Shining Lugia. Shining Lugia is one of the better counters to Hoopa and Alolan Ninetales there, because of their safeguard abilities that prevent them from taking damage from EX and GX Pokemon. So, Argent Wing does 60 plus 60 if your opponent's active has an ability. So, pretty much just deals with that whole problem right there. We're playing a lot of GX in this deck, so we need something to kind of counteract those guys. Alright, so this is the first tech, and I'm not sure whether or not I want to keep it in here or not, but you're more than welcome to swap this around with a card that we'll get into later, and I'll mention it later. But we're playing a single copy of the new Deoxys with the Psychic attack for the double colorless, because this is essentially the new Evolutions Mewtwo, except it has 10 less HP and 1 less retreat cost. So I personally like this one a little bit better. But yeah, Psychic does damage based on how much energy your opponent's active has. So Buzzwole is kind of an issue for something like Zoroark. We deal with Lycanroc perfectly fine due to the fact that we have Shiftry in the deck, but we still have to worry about Buzzwole. I do think Buzzwole is still a really solid deck, and it might be something that we're going to have to look out for after post-rotation, but here you go. And you know what? If Buzzwole isn't a thing, feel free to swap this card out for something else. And you know what? If you feel comfortable with just with Shiftry, then that's fine as well. But I feel because I'm playing Zoroark, I need some kind of additional attacker. And lastly, this one can go either way. So, I'm playing a copy of Dunsparce. This is great for setting up Pokemon onto the bench, and we play a lot of Pokemon in the deck. So, this is a great way to grab 2 Seedot and a Zorua, vice versa. Maybe we just wanted to grab all of our Seedot just in case. Doesn't matter. Dunsparce is super good with the Strike and Run attack, basically being the new Bridget. And of course we have Sudden Flash for 10 and a colorless energy. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. I think it's a solid attack. And you know, it's just a coin flip to see if you get paralysis or not. And I've had this card paralyze me 3 turns in a row and really messed up what I was doing. So yeah, it's an interesting one. However, this one is kind of interchangeable with this guy. So, the Resource Management Warren Guru is pretty solid. It not only helps us deal with something like Hoopa and Ninetales, but it lets us get our resources back, which could definitely be very useful in this deck. Maybe we had to discard a couple rare candy because we need to draw into things, or maybe we need supporters back. It doesn't really matter what we need. Resource Management or Guru is going to allow us to do so, and I think that if you're trying to fit something in, these guys are a little bit interchangeable. They're both support roles for 1 energy, ideally. I just like the idea of getting Pokemon into play, but if I ever had any problems, I would definitely swap it around with Oranguru due to the fact that just getting double colorless energies back is pretty good and things like that. So, either way, yeah. So moving on to our supporters, we have 3 copies of Cynthia. So, this is a deck that really needs room for Judge and Copycat. So we can't play the full 4 line of Cynthia here. Would have loved to. There's just limitations to the deck. So 3 is good enough. Best draw support in the game at the moment, so that's fine. Next up, we got 3 copies of Guzma. I always play Palpat in my deck, so 3 copies seems to be a fair amount, and I just can't explain it. I think 3 is the way to go. So being able to pull up a Pokemon, getting a knockout on it, or getting one of our other guys out of the retreat cost is usually a pretty good thing. So here's my first deck that's running a full playset of Copycat. I'm not sure what to say here. We kind of just need this. This is our bread and butter that's going to allow Shiftry to work. So shuffle our hand into our deck, cut the number of cards in your opponent's hand, draw that many cards. It's pretty straightforward. If they have a lot of cards, we get a lot of cards. If they don't, I mean, we play Zoroark, so we Copycat in Zoroark if we really need to, but first turn usually pretty decent. Not usually what you want to do first turn. If you're pulling mulligans a couple times, you know, then that's great. Or gets a couple mulligans off of you, so I don't know. It is what it is, right? Next up, we got 3 copies of Judge. So Judge, of course, is our best disruption, and it's just ideal, I suppose. So both players shuffle their hands, draw 4 cards. It's very slow, and I haven't had much luck locking out my opponent from the game by playing this, due to the fact that when it comes to their turn, they'll have 5 cards in their hand to work with, and something like N could leave them with 3 cards in their hand. So Judge isn't as powerful, especially when people are playing Zoroark and things like that. So, but other than that, this is just mainly here to try and disrupt while also having the same hand size as our opponent, so we can use Shiftry to its best ability. And lastly, we have a copy of Mallow. So, search your deck for 2 cards, put it on top of your deck in any order. Of course, this is the best card to use with Zoroark. You grab any 2 cards from your deck that you need, and then you just use trade, draw into them immediately. It's like a double Skyla or double computer search, essentially, but it'll take up our supporter for the turn, which is definitely pretty annoying. However, maybe we need Grass Energy and a rare candy, or maybe we need the Choice Band, anything like that. I think Mallow is a pretty good inclusion. However, there is also the option of running a Acerola. So I think if you're okay with dropping Mallow at Acerola, again, you could even drop the Deoxys for Acerola if you really wanted to. But you get to essentially stop your opponent from getting a knockout, one of your guys. Maybe you don't want it in the active spot. Anything along those lines. Acerola is usually pretty solid. Maybe you want to reuse this Deoxys and keep hitting Buzzwole really hard. You can just go ahead and Acerola it up, put it back down. I think it's pretty solid. So, moving on to our items, we have 4 copies of Ultra Ball, because it is our best way to search out Pokemon, and we're playing guys that really don't benefit from anything else. So 4 copies of Ultra Ball. I can put down. Next up, we're playing 4 copies of Rare Candy. I know that I have mentioned resource management and the fact that we're also playing a 3-1-3 line of Shiftry. We still want to get them into play, though. I couldn't justify playing a 4th C-Dot. I definitely could not justify playing a 4th Shiftry. We have a very heavy Zoroark lineup, but Zoroark is our main attacker here, so yeah, but just if you do whiff the rare candy, it can be really bad. And I know with Mallow you can guarantee that rare candy for the turn, but still, I just feel that 4 is a nice safe amount. If you want to drop one down, feel free to do so. I prefer the likely chance that I will be able to evolve my Shiftry. So I am playing 4 copies of it. It's kind of also like how people were playing 3 copies of Bridget, and they were like, well, if I don't need it later on, I can just trade it away. So, there you go. It's kind of like that. We're playing 3 copies of Choice Band because improving our damage output is very important for Shiftry. Zoroark, it's a 2-hit kill machine. Like, we don't really necessarily need Choice Band on it. If we wanted, like, Choice Band Kukui, we could knock out Lele's and stuff like that, but we're not going down that road. So, mainly here for Shiftry, but could definitely be used with Deoxys very effectively against Buzzwole, or I guess maybe Shining Lugia just to hit a little bit harder. So, there is that. Onto our, well, I was going to say one-offs. I forgot I was playing 2 copies of Field Blower here. I think that tools are going to become very annoying. Rayquaza and Metal decks are going to have very annoying tools that we don't want in play. So if we can get rid of a Wishful Baton or a Choice Band or even just a Metal Frying Pan, I think that's good. There's definitely still annoying stadiums that people are going to try and play. So I think Field Blower is pretty solid for getting rid of those as well. But other than that, we don't have to worry about abilities or anything. So yeah, but there's room in it for 2 Field Blower, so I'm playing 2 copies of it. Alright, so now we're playing a copy of Palpad. Of course, I say it, I play it in every deck. I just think it's super solid, being able to reuse some of our powerful supporters. Just getting Guzma back seems like a good idea to me. And lastly, we have a copy of Rusty Stretcher. Because we play a lot of Pokemon, we want to get those Pokemon back in play. If you play Resource Manager or Guru, then you could even reuse this if you really wanted to. I just think it's a very important card to be playing. And before we go to our energy lineup, our last kind of swappable card I feel is Multi-Switch. Due to the fact that Shiftry's attack is a grass and double colorless, I think it's very useful to be able to go ahead and move a double colorless from the bench to an active Shiftry. I think this card is going to be great in the upcoming formats due to the fact that we aren't too... we don't have a lot of ways to accelerate energy very well. We're losing Max Elixir, and the best thing we have are things like Rayquaza or Aqua Patch to really accelerate energy. So I just think that Multi-Switch seems like it's pretty solid. So, alright, moving on to our energy lineup. We are playing 6 copies of Grass Energy because we want extra energy. Shining Lugia will take 3. Dunsparce is going to take 1. Shiftry's attacks are going to cost grass, so having them is a good idea. I know people kind of like to run 5 or 4. I'm not too satisfied with that. I like to make sure I have energy in my deck so I can actually get my attacks off. Because knowing me, I will attach a grass energy 1 turn to a Zoroark because I'm just thinking I don't want to get enhanced hammered, but I also want to attack with it somewhere down the road. So you can essentially just assume that 2 of these are going to a Zoroark and we have 4 to work with somewhere down the road. So if we use Dunsparce turn 1, then we got 3 to work with, and we got to be a little bit more stingy with our plays, things like that. So I think 6 is a relatively good amount. And with resource management, we'll be able to get those back too if we really need to. So lastly, we are playing 4 copies of Double Colorless Energy because this is what allows us to attack more effectively than anything else. So very important card to be putting into the deck. So that's my take on Shiftry. I hope you guys enjoyed. There's a lot to be said about Shiftry. It's a pretty interesting deck. Has great potential, and I'm looking forward to some heavy playtesting with it. But probably going to be it for now, unless you guys have some other deck ideas you want me to tackle. Again, leave those in the comment section below, and I'll go ahead and take a look at them, try and make some decks, maybe play some TCGO with some decks. But with that being said, thank you guys all so much for all the support and watching. If you guys did enjoy, if you did, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. Stay up to date with my future content, and until then, I will see you all next time.